The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and around the world on the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, and TalkStreamLive.com. My guest this hour is Preston Dennett. We've had the pleasure of having Preston on the show many times, a good friend of the X Zone. He began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, friends, and co-workers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomenon. He is a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, a ghost hunter, paranormal researcher, and the author of 17 books and more than 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. His articles have appeared in numerous magazines, including Fate, Atlantis Rising, MUFON Journal Nexus, Paranormal Magazine, UFO Magazine, Mysteries Magazine, Ufologists, and others. His writings have been translated into several different languages, including German, French, Portuguese, Russian, Chinese, and Icelandic. He has appeared on numerous radio and television shows. He's taught classes on various paranormal subjects and lectures across the United States. He currently resides in Reseda, California. And joining us now is Preston Dennett. And Preston, welcome back to the X Zone.
Thanks, Rob. Glad to be here.
Tell me, I understand you've got a new book out entitled Not From Here, Volume 2. What's it about?
Yeah, this is the second volume of a series of books I'm putting out about all the articles I've written over the years. You know, I've put out a bunch of books, but I was going through my old articles and thought, oh my God, you know, this is an enormous amount of research I've put out, which has kind of disappeared, you know, from public view, from accessibility. So I've been going through them, updating them, and it's such an experience because I get to explore all these. I mean, what these books are basically about is the more unusual aspects of the UFO phenomena. You know, things that you don't normally hear about.
What would they be, Preston?
Well, the more bizarre cases, the more unusual cases. Like in this second volume, I have a chapter on UFOs that have rescued people from sinking ships.
Really?
Which is, you know, there's a few unusual cases, enough to, you know, do an analysis, certainly. There's a chapter on rockets and UFOs, how UFOs have been tracking our space program for a very long time. A bunch of stuff like that. There's probably my favorite one is this chapter about how UFOs are able to manipulate size, and not only their own ships, but with people and, you know, space-time. Virtually, they can manipulate to a degree that's almost mind-boggling.
Would you say that's your favorite story in the book?
Yeah, because, I mean, it's so unusual. I mean, because it started out where I heard about this case where a lady who was shrunk down in size. I thought, you know, that's kind of hard to believe. This was a contactee case up in Oregon. And as I started to look into it, I thought, you know what? There's another case like that, and it was Betty Andreasen.
That's right, yeah.
Who's, you know, a pretty credible case with Raymond Fowler.
Yeah.
Same thing. She said these ETs put a ray on their ship, who she had just seen a man been taken on board, and shrunk it down to this tiny size, which they had a word for it. In fact, they called it deoculating. So I started to look into this, and I found a bunch of cases. And I have to tell you, Rob, the most interesting one, I mean, there was a bunch of really cool cases.
Right.
Particularly where people would see a small UFO, and they'd go on board, and it was large inside, much larger than it had appeared. But the best case of this came from Leonard Stringfield. And he had a case where he interviewed a man who was taken to photograph the inside of a UFO, right? Mm-hmm. And, there's a lot of cases like this in the literature. But what's interesting about this case is he goes to photograph the inside of this UFO, which he says is about 40 feet across. Goes inside, and he says it's as big as a football field. You couldn't throw a rock and hit the other side.
Hey, Preston, stand by, my friend. We've got to take our first break. Exo Nation, our guest this hour, Preston Dennett, his website, www.prestondennett.weebly.com, and we'll come back talking more about UFOs with Preston Dennett as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology. Celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
Gibbs A. Williams, Ph.D., is a practicing psychoanalyst, supervisor, researcher, and author in New York City. Much of his life has been dedicated to understanding nature and the uses of meaningful coincidences or synchronicities. His radical and original non-Jungian, non-mystical, non-magical theory of synchronicities illuminates much of the fog surrounding this challenging and perplexing topic. His ideas and manners are fresh, presented in a style that is both entertaining and highly informative. He is also an expert on crisis intervention, specially focused on violence reduction for the police and citizens, mastering anxiety, frustration, and stress without the use of medication, and effectively preventing and treating heroin addiction. Dr. Williams can be contacted at his email address at gwwilliamsny11@aol.com or visit his website at www.drgibbswilliams.com.
Carl O. Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Preston Dennett is our guest this hour, Exo Nation. His website again is prestondennett.weebly.com. Preston, what is the alien breathing pool?
This is another one of those weird areas that I explored in this book. Mm-hmm. And, I tried to explore all these different procedures that are people experience on board UFOs that you don't hear a lot about. And one of them is this UFO breathing pool. And honestly, we don't know what it is, but it's so bizarre because, there's a smattering of cases, not a whole lot, but enough to like certainly make you question it, where people are taken on board a UFO, and most people are examined or shown the engine room or what have you. These people are taken into a room where there's these pools, for lack of a better word, like hot tubs or tanks, and immersed in them and told, they're not only immersed in them, they're put under water. And this does not appear to be normal water because they are able to breathe it. Now, we have breathable liquids here, perfluorocarbons, and this is, I think, is what is happening here. But the question is why. It's very bizarre. There's the witnesses completely freak out. They think they're drowning. There's a number of different theories, of course. Maybe these are emotional testing, or perhaps something medical, or perhaps testing weight and volume and things like this, or to even transport people, which does seem to be true in at least a couple of cases. I've talked to people who've experienced this. It's,
really?
It's a very bizarre experience, and there's enough cases now. Where it's become pretty well known. Yvonne Smith has had cases, David Jacobs, and most of the major researchers. So I don't know. I don't know what it is because each case is a little bit different. In some cases, they're put in a chair, and the chair fills up with this liquid, and they're told to breathe it. And this would essentially fill all the hollow, lungs and things like this, which would be destroyed by massive accelerations. But the fault in that reasoning is UFOs don't usually seem to have massive accelerations when you're inside them. So why would they need that?
It reminds me of a movie I saw, and I can't remember the name of it, where these deep-sea divers actually...
The Abyss.
That's it, The Abyss, right.
Yeah, it's like that. It's interesting. I think there's something to that. And certainly, we do have perfluorocarbons. We've been able to keep animals alive, and some humans have done this as well. We're still at the very experimental stage. But I tend to think it has something to do with that. Because the water that's described, or the liquid rather, doesn't get people wet. It kind of rubs off like oil, sort of. So there's something unusual about it for sure.
Now, in your book, you also have a chapter on UFOs and rockets. Are they watching us, really?
Oh, yeah. I was surprised. I did an enormous amount of research into this, and I must have collected about 50 cases. Maybe not quite that many, but certainly dozens. And this starts out from the beginning of the modern UFO age, pretty much right at White Sands back in 1947, where they were doing all this rocket testing. And in case after case after case, all throughout the late 1940s through the early 1950s, White Sands was literally invaded by UFOs, to the point where the commander of the base actually went public and said, we've been having encounters with UFOs. And from there, it spread to Edwards Air Force Base, where they had a number of encounters. It just goes on and on. There's one really interesting case in Nevada where they were doing a high altitude test with the fastest plane at the time and the highest. And what did they see but 5 discs above them? Certainly not ours, because we were already going as high as we could.
Right.
And there was a second test a month later. And same thing happened. So they're definitely watching us. And to the extent, Rob, that I found, I think it was 3 cases where people used toy model rockets. And there was a case in Nevada and a case in New York. They used toy model rockets, and these actually provoked a UFO into appearing to come and monitor these rockets.
Oh, my gosh.
I know, it's crazy. There's this case up in New York. His father went out with his 3 sons.
Yeah.
And to launch these rockets. And sure enough, these little discs started showing up and circling their little toy model rockets.
Unbelievable.
And case after case, it goes on right up to the modern day. There was recently activity over a Chinese satellite launch where a UFO was caught right there on tape, and no one knew what it was. There was no comment from authorities. And you can go see the footage online. It goes on and on. They are definitely watching us. Don't even get me talking about the moon, but Yeah, they're absolutely keeping very close monitoring on us.
Listen, speaking about cover-ups, conspiracies, and not giving out the information, what do you think about the recent controversy where NASA is accused of covering up UFO footage over the International Space Station?
This is not the first time this has happened. This is the last in a long line of incidents. In this case, there was this UFO. Some person posted this on YouTube, footage of this, NASA's live feed, which shows this object. I've seen it coming down from above, slowly kind of descending. It looks unidentified, certainly. It's moving slowly, and then they cut off the live feed. And this is where there's controversy, because this guy says, oh, well, they're cutting it off because of UFOs in the scene. And NASA replied and saying, no, we naturally cut this off as the space station is turning. And, that may be true. But what NASA didn't do is provide an explanation for what the thing was. And if they weren't, if this wasn't the 100th freaking time that they've done this, this is a long list of stuff that they've done to the point where their nickname, which reporters gave them, is never a straight answer, is what NASA actually stands for.
I remember hearing that. Listen, you said, don't get me talking about the moon. Why not?
I recently did a TV pilot, and they wanted to talk about the moon. And just so happens, years ago, I interviewed this gentleman who was very persuasive and told me that he was involved in the NASA cover-up, and was telling me that there were crashed UFOs on the moon, active alien space stations, UFOs, the whole deal. Of course, I didn't know much about the moon, but this was back in the, 1990, mid-1990s. I was investigating the Topanga Canyon UFO wave at the time.
All right.
And he was actually a witness, one of the witnesses. There were hundreds of witnesses, by the way. But at any rate, he's telling me this incredible story, and I'm like, no way. So I thought I'd do my research, of course, and I've sat on his story for years and years, honestly, because it was just so incredible. I mean, that wasn't all he said. And I have to tell you, over the years, it's been, since 1995, what's it, 20 years now?
Yeah.
It's just become more and more verified with reports from, Richard Hoagland and all the artifacts on the moon, and certainly the NASA photograph controversy, which wasn't a big thing back then. There were a few books out, but nothing like there is now.
Wasn't Richard Hoagland the guy who also brought forth the face on Mars?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So I've looked into it, I've done an enormous amount of research, and a lot of NASA insiders have actually come forth. From Maurice Chatelain, Chris Kraft, there's Herman Oberth, a bunch of them have said amazing statements about UFOs. And if you study the moon, which is actually, I found out, telescopes were invented in around 1600. And it was about, when they started seriously using them and turning them on the moon, immediately they started seeing these lights. And they recorded them. And there's about 1,000 cases or more of lights being seen in patterns, circles, crosses, lines. There's reports of bridges, of moon domes appearing and disappearing, shadows. It's called lunar anomalies. It actually got to be so common, science had to just explain it somehow. So they called them TLP, transient lunar phenomena. Now, this is all just pure mainstream science here. They don't know what it is. They can't explain it. And it hasn't been addressed really at all.
Is it possible that these lights, these crafts, and these buildings are from another country who has been back to the moon? Because we know that the United States wasn't the only country to go to the moon. Maybe the only country that put humans on the moon way back then, but Russia was there first, and other nations are. Are you in a swimming pool?
No.
Oh, kind of, because it sounds like you're in fluid. That's why I asked you. Is it possible that the buildings and everything else are terrestrial, that they have nothing to do with ETs?
Well, I've wondered about that, certainly, and I think that there, is some question whether or not there are humans on the moon.
Yeah.
But for the most part, no. It appears that a lot of this stuff has been there for a long time. I know that the Russians pretty much beat us to every step to the moon, except officially for the landing. I mean, they were the first to go around it, the first to do a soft landing, the first to do a hard landing. We were supposedly the first to land a person on the moon. But there's a lot of controversy up and down the moon missions.
Hey, listen, Preston, you and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. X-Zone Nation, Preston Dennett is our guest. www.prestondennett.weebly.com. And Preston and I will return on the other side of this break as we continue investigating the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology right here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right. Transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
From the International Desk at the Canadian News Network, I'm Rob McConnell. A glass ceiling is shattering at the Democratic National Convention as Hillary Clinton ascends to the presidential nomination with Tuesday's roll call of the states, the first woman to lead a major party into a White House race. Clinton's campaign hopes to use the achievements to bolster her popularity, mindful that while many voters are happy to be nominating a woman, they're not wild about this particular one. Former President Bill Clinton, a string of celebrities, and other speakers will offer primetime testimonials to her career highlights and her advocacy efforts, hoping to soften her image and resistance to her campaign. Two attackers slit the throat of an 85-year-old priest celebrating Mass in a French church, killing him and gravely injuring one of the few worshippers present before being shot to death by police. A nun who escaped said she saw the attackers take a video of themselves and give a sermon in Arabic around the altar. The Islamic State group claimed responsibility for the attack, the first inside a church in the West. Police rescued the three people inside the church, including a second nun, in the small northwestern town of Saint-Étienne de Rouvray, said Interior ministry spokesperson Pierre-Henri Brandet. Ethan Dean was living his dream on Tuesday. The 6-year-old has a garbage truck bedspread and pillow. He has garbage truck toys. He's had a garbage truck birthday party. Now, thanks to the Make-A-Wish Foundation, he got to experience what it's like to be a garbage truck driver. The boy who has cystic fibrosis rode in a real garbage truck through downtown Sacramento, collecting trash and recyclables, just like he's always wanted to do. At his first stop in Sacramento, he was greeted by a crowd of more than 100 people at the Sacramento Bee. Wearing a cape that said Hero Ethan and a big smile, the boy seemed enthusiastic and surprised. The killing of 19 people at a home for the mentally disabled raised questions about whether Japan's reputation as one of the safest countries in the world is creating a false sense of security. The deadliest mass killing in Japan in the post-World War II era unfolded Tuesday in Sagamihara, a city about 50 kilometers west of central Tokyo, when authorities say a former employee broke into the facility and stabbed more than 40 people before calmly turning himself into the police. The suspect, identified as 26-year-old Satoshi Uematsu, had worked at the facility from 2014 until February, when he was let go. When militants loyal to the Islamic State group seek to inflict pain on Europe, France is their preferred target, a grim reality borne out yet again with Tuesday's knife slaughter of a Catholic priest. Since January 2015, Islamic State-inspired attackers have killed at least 235 people in France, by far the largest casualty rate of any Western country. French citizens or French-speaking residents have committed the overwhelming majority of strikes, often employing suicide tactics alongside command of their home surroundings. President François Hollande argues that France is their top enemy on the continent because of his homeland's reputation as a cradle of human rights and democracy. From the International Desk at the Canadian News Network, I'm Rob McConnell. What if someone told you you could live to be 120? Would you believe him? What if he told you the Bible guaranteed it? All you needed to do was follow his rules and buy his products. Would you do it? What if you invested 20 years of your life in him? What if he tested his substances on your child? What if your child became brain damaged as a result? Meet Dr. Tyler Belknap, a fast-talking Texas admin turned health guru. At the helm of a vast health food and supplement empire, he has established himself as the authority on nutrition and longevity. But what his followers don't know is that his products are laced with bizarre psychoactive substances from genetically modified plants developed in his very own secret lab. No wonder his customers can't stop using them. Tyler Belknap will stop at nothing to keep his edge in the market, even if it means experimenting on children. Chasing 120, a story of food, faith, fraud, and the pursuit of longevity, a novel from the pen of political cartoonist Monty Wolverton, is an easy and entertaining read full of rich characters and intrigue. It hits home in a world filled with all kind of hucksterism and offers a glimpse of what can happen when GMO technology falls into the wrong hands. Chasing 120 by Monty Wolverton. Get your copy today at www.ptm.org/120 or on Amazon.com.
Preston Dennett is our guest this hour, Exonation, PrestonDennett.weebly.com. And Preston, you've got a new book coming out entitled UFOs Over Arizona. Now, what's the most unusual case in this book?
Well, you know, you're putting me on the spot with that one. There's certainly a lot of great cases there. It's a major state when it comes to UFO activity, for sure. I mean, there's the Travis Walton case and the Phoenix Lights. Mm-hmm. But there was one case, you know, that does come to mind, which is really unusual, and I just keep coming back to it for some reason, involving these ranchers. I believe this is north of Phoenix. This is out kind of in a very rural area, a very rural ranch, where they saw this UFO coming down over the main ranch house and kind of just hung there A couple of people took photographs of it. There was a number of people who saw this, so they all came out of their houses. The animals were acting crazy. And at some point, something kind of strange happened. Everyone just decided it wasn't anything dramatic, and they just went inside and went to bed. And essentially seemed to have missing time. At any rate, they wake up the next morning, and so some of them have scars in their body, and there's some trauma in that regard. But at any rate, they go to the store to cash their paycheck. This is something they did normally at the end of the week. Mm-hmm. And they go there, they all drive together. It's a ways out to civilization. Go to the place where they cash their paycheck, and the guy's like, well, the guy who's cashing their checks, like, you guys are 3 days late. What's going on? There's a whole bunch of you guys coming out here from various ranches, and you're all thinking it's, Saturday, when in fact it's like Wednesday. They had 3 days of missing time, is what it came down to. And it wasn't just them. This is a large group of people at this ranch. Turned out there was 3 neighboring counties.
Wow.
Where this all happened, where, they had 3 days of missing time. That's very unusual. And, but it seems to be a legitimate case. I don't know. The photographs didn't come out. There was one that did, and that was using a Polaroid, but it still just shows this kind of blurry thing. But as a result of this incident, a bunch of these people moved away. Others bought guard dogs. They, locked up their houses. It really traumatized this community.
So why do you think there is so much UFO activity over the skies of Arizona?
It's hard to say. There's certain areas that certainly are hot spots. It's got a lot of copper there. I think that might be it, because there's a lot of cases over, the various copper plants that are there. A number of, but I don't think that's the only thing. I don't know. California's, every state seems to have their kind of UFO attractor. They're attracted to graveyards. They're attracted mostly to people, is what it comes down to. But I don't know why Arizona, but it's definitely one of the top states.
You mentioned the Travis Walton case before. What is your take on Fire in the Sky, the Travis Walton case?
Well, I certainly think the case is legitimate. I've spoken with Travis, and there's no doubt about that. I think in the UFO community, the Fire in the Sky, the movie, was great, except for the UFO segment, which, in some, essence, kind of set back the UFO community.
Really?
Because, the onboard sequence was completely fictionalized. It was utterly terrifying and not at all what happened.
Wow.
And I have to tell you, I had a number of people come up to me, and still happens to this day, not as much, but come up to me and ask me, oh my God, do they do that to you? Do they, wrap sheets around you and suffocate you? And is that what it looks like inside a UFO? And I'm like, no. It's not at all what happens. What they did kind of captures the essence of the weirdness of it.
Yeah.
But and otherwise, the movie was great. Every other aspect was awesome. There's a new documentary out, which I understand is getting great reviews. So yeah, it's a great case. I don't think we've heard the end of it.
I've had Jennifer Stein on, who is one of the producers of Travis Walton, the movie, and we're certainly looking forward to having Travis on with Jennifer for a 2-hour special in a week or two. Based on all the work you've done over the years, what, in your opinion, is the most credible UFO sighting, number one, and the most credible UFO abduction case?
All right. Most credible UFO sighting? Well, for me, those would be the mass UFO sightings. There's the Fatima incident, which took place a while back. There's the Farmington, New Mexico incident, which involved about 1,000 witnesses. The Phoenix Lights. Certainly the Hudson Valley Wave has got to be right up there on the top of the list. There's a number of them. It's hard to point to one. I'm not sure I could even point to one, though. Maybe the California one that took place back in 1942, the LA air raid, the Battle of Los Angeles, it's been called, where this object showed up over LA, caused a blackout, was seen by thousands of people. was photographed. We shot at it. It's a great case, still unexplained. There's government documents on it. So that's got to be one of them. But yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah.
And as far as abductions or onboard cases, I could go right down a huge list again. I mean, personally, the best case I've personally investigated would probably be maybe the Coronado Island UFO incident.
Tell us about that case.
I was actually lecturing, and one of the witnesses approached me and asked me to, help write his book. And I eventually agreed after, hearing he was pretty, eager to do it. I really encouraged him to do it himself. But this case involved, I initially thought it was 6 or 8 people. It turned out to be quite a bit more. This was down on Coronado Island, which is just north of Mexico, back in 1994. Actually, there was a UFO conference being held at the time, and there was a bunch of people down on Coronado. Now, Coronado is an unusual place. It's a tourist island. It's covered with police. It's where the Navy SEALs train. It's a quasi-military island. Really not the place for a UFO encounter. But this is where it happened, in this one hotel. And it turns out in a couple of other hotels. 3 adjoining rooms. The witnesses all experienced an encounter on the same night. And in most regards, it's your typical encounter. They were implanted, they saw gray-type aliens, they were sucked up into the ship, this type of thing. But what's unusual is the place. I mean, this is where Clinton was coming to visit in 2 days. The island was literally covered with Secret Service personnel at the time. So why is this going on? Why a mass encounter at this time?
Good question.
And what I like about this case is it's got a great physical evidence. A lot of cases are really rely on just the person's testimony. Now, this had multiple eyewitness testimony which corroborated each other, and medical evidence. There was one guy in the first room who had a hole in his ear, which was diagnosed, and later when, he's a nurse, Mike Evans is his name, he co-wrote the book.
Right.
And later had all these MRIs taken, which showed some foreign bodies, how they were diagnosed in his brain, which, he thinks took place during this incident. Now, there's another lady in the second room. She ended up having her implant removed by Dr. Roger Lear. I interviewed her. The whole deal. She had very flu-ish symptoms following her encounter, had this scar on her leg, eventually had this implant removed, which matched other implants, had a number of unusual properties, no foreign body reaction, appeared to be composed of meteoritic iron, this type of thing.
Unreal.
And just crazy. So this was, pretty solid case. And it just grew after that. I mean, Yvonne Smith was originally in charge of the case, researcher Yvonne Smith. And there's another book written about it, which she wrote. And I don't think we've heard the end of this case. It's a big case, and definitely one of the, more impressive ones that I've worked on. But yeah, there's a bunch of them. The Allagash 4 is certainly a very impressive case by Raymond Fowler. And there's a whole list of abduction cases. I find the whole abduction phenomenon very compelling. I have no doubt it's taking place.
What about the story about Planet Serpo?
Yeah, by Len Kasten. This is, when I read something like this, I try to hold back a little bit before I make judgment and wait for corroboration. And we don't have a whole lot of corroboration of this. But I read the book. It certainly seems very sincere. It's pretty compelling, I have to say. But I don't know. What I find interesting about it is there are similar stories coming out like that. Corey Good, I believe is his name, and a number of other contactees are saying very similar things. And, where there's smoke, there's fire. I think there's definitely something going on as far as the secret space program.
Yes.
I do believe, I believe we're using this technology. I did an interview years ago with kind of a second-hand interview. The guy wouldn't talk to me firsthand. I had to work through an intermediary. But he talked about, reverse engineering. This was back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And I certainly have heard a lot about that since. I get a constant stream of emails from people.
But if there was reverse engineering, don't you think that we would be using it in our present-day space exploration? For example, when we send a robot to Mars or when we send a spacecraft to the outer planets instead of the solid rocket fuel propulsion systems that we're using today?
Yeah, and I find this all very confusing because what it looks like, I haven't been able to confirm this, is that there's a secret space program and that we are using this technology. And, the guy I interviewed who said he was involved in this whole cover-up said the astronauts were very upset that they found out they were part of this whitewash and that they were kind of just, publicity stuff.
Wow, it sounds like there's a double set of books here.
Right, exactly. Yeah. They've washed the books.
Oh, my gosh.
And NASA, they're on my naughty list. I have to tell you, recently they said, in 20 years, we'll have proof of alien life. And I just had to kind of scoff and say, well, what you're saying here, if you're reading between the lines, is in 20 years you're going to tell us that you already have proof. Because how can you predict that?
So what NASA is doing is they're saying in 20 years they're going to have proof of alien life, where Donald Trump did it this year already. So let's get on with it.
Exactly. I mean, it is coming out. This stuff is coming out. The lunar anomaly phenomena hasn't stopped. I mean, it's been strong throughout the 1800s, the 1900s, and continues to be reported today. Lights on the moon, weird markings. And the truth, kind of has a way of taking care of itself. And if it's true, it's going to come out, is the way I'm looking at it.
What about the theory that the moon landing was a total hoax?
I don't think it holds water.
Okay.
I think since the moon landing started, there's been controversy, but there's no doubt they took place. They were photographed completely. It's interesting that we lost the footage. Did you hear about that? NASA supposedly lost the original moon footage.
All right, stand by, buddy. Let's talk about this when we wrap up on the other side of this break. Exonation, our guest this hour is Preston Dennett. His website is prestondennett.weebly.com. And Preston and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break as we wrap up this hour and tonight here in the X Zone. But don't forget, you can listen to the best of the X Zone episodes that we have on tonight. Starting at 2 o'clock in order, they are Kevin Randall talking about the Roswell, Mexico crash, Joshua Shapiro talking about crystal skulls, David Franklin Farkas, he is a house healer, and Stacy, who alleges that the FBI, CIA, DEI, and Boise, Idaho police are in cahoots covering up serious crimes. This can be heard right here on xzbn.net or on TalkStreamLive.com. We'll be back on the other side of this break, X Zone Nation. Don't go away.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology. Celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
That when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Gibbs A. Williams, Ph.D., is a practicing psychoanalyst, supervisor, researcher, and author in New York City. Much of his life has been dedicated to understanding nature and the uses of meaningful coincidences or synchronicities. His radical and original non-Jungian, non-mystical, non-magical theory of synchronicities illuminates much of the fog surrounding this challenging and perplexing topic. His ideas and manners are fresh, presented in a style that is both entertaining and highly informative. He is also an expert on crisis intervention, specially focused on violence reduction for the police and citizens, mastering anxiety, frustration, and stress without the use of medication, and effectively preventing and treating heroin addiction. Dr. Williams can be contacted at his email address at gwwilliamsny11@aol.com or visit his website at www.drgibbswilliams.com.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right. Transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
Preston Dennett is my guest of this hour. Exonation, www.prestondennett.weebly.com. And thanks very much for joining us tonight, Preston. Always a great pleasure talking to you. But before we went to the commercial break, we were just going to start talking about something, and I forgot what it was.
I haven't. We were talking about NASA and their cover-up and how they lost the moon footage.
Yeah.
And, all this stuff. I think part of the moon footage may have been faked. And I think this is where the whole controversy comes in. They haven't released all the moon rocks either. Only a small portion of it has been available to scientists. So what did they actually recover? And according to the guy I talked to, the main reason to go there was to recover a lot of this alien artifacts. And that's why they were landing there, to find out what exactly was going on the moon. And they found all this stuff. And there's been a cover-up ever since. And supposedly we were followed to and from the moon by craft, by UFOs, which has been, verified by multiple sources. Supposedly when we landed on the moon, there were UFOs there. And so a lot of the footage that we see of the moon, well, not a lot, but apparently some of it, which was conveniently lost, was faked. And what I find interesting in support of this? I mean, there's a lot of people who've actually seen footage of the moon, of Larry Warren, of, the whole Rendlesham incident, talks about how he and a group of soldiers actually saw footage from the Army of moon bases. And there's a number of people who've said this, NASA insiders. So I think there is something up there.
So what would be the purpose of anyone to suppress this information? Why isn't it public knowledge then?
I think there's certainly a lot of reasons for this, and I can only really speculate. I think part of it is that they painted themselves into a corner. They covered it up initially, and that's been the policy. And it's kind of hard to get yourself out of that sort of situation without raising a lot of questions and legal implications, certainly. And beyond that, there's the whole power struggle, politics, which is present in every aspect of society. And people are going to have to hold on to power when they can. And people who have hold of this kind of stuff aren't going to let go easily.
But if there are artifacts on the moon, if there is alien technology on the moon, with the new countries that have developed spacecraft and that are going to the moon, is there a chance that they'll spill the beans and that the entire UFO phenomenon may be coming to a head faster than we think?
I think so, absolutely. Disclosure is trending.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a plan towards it, probably officially, and certainly it's coming from three sides. It's coming from the UFOs.
Well, that was kind of rude now, wasn't it? Thanks, Craig. That's Craig's way of letting me know we have to get going for tonight. Preston, do me a favor, come back in a couple of weeks. We've got to finish this conversation, and let's take a close look into the moon landings. How's that sound?
Hey, I'm ready anytime.
All right, you take care of yourself, my good friend. Exonation Preston Dennett has been our guest. PrestonDennett.weebly.com. Well, that's it for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow night at 11 o'clock as once again we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X-Zone. So from everyone here at the X-Zone to everyone out there, remember, be nice to each other and always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night, everyone.